Hey, Lucy, it's Jonathan, the cheap and cheerful record collector. Today's video is going to be a tribute to one of the greatest guitar players of all time, I think, and that's Michael Bloomfield. He was born today, July 28th, in 1943. Today would have been his 80th birthday. Unfortunately, he passed away February 15th, 1981, at 37 years old. Mike was born in Chicago, started hanging out in the south side and west side of Chicago with all the blues clubs, played with Howlin' Wolf and Muddy Waters when he was like 15, 16, 17 years old. Played all around the Chicago area for many years, backing up lots of musicians. Just an amazing guitar player. I have a bunch of his albums, as well as albums that he played in, and I tried to put them in some sort of chronological order. So the first time I ever heard of Michael Bloomfield was when I had this album by John Hammond called So Many Roads. This was from 1965, and on this album is basically the beginnings of the band, because you have Robbie Robertson playing guitar, Levon Helm playing drums, and Eric Hudson playing organ. You have Charlie Musselwhite on harmonica, Jimmy Lewis on bass, and on this one, Mike Bloomfield plays piano. And I had this record probably in 65 or 66 when I was 16 or 17 years old. And that's the first time I ever heard of those guys. Also on this album turned me on to a lot of blues people, because on the back of the album, when you show the track listing, they showed all the people that wrote the songs. And I was really into that. So I was looking at that and I'm going, oh, Willie Dixon, who's that? Muddy Waters, I knew. Ed McDaniels, who's that? Of course, that's Bo Diddley. And then, of course, I saw Judgment Day, Robert Johnson. I had never heard of Robert Johnson at that time. So this really turned me on to a lot of blues people. And I started digging further in by reading the liner notes on this album. But that's the first time I ever heard of Michael Bloomfield on this album from 1965, John Hammond, So Many Roads. Also in 1965, this album came out, and I was completely blown away by this album. And it's the first Paul Butterfield blues album, with Elvin Bishop on rhythm guitar, Jeremy Arnold on bass, Sam Lay on drums, Mark Knapflin on organ, and the great Michael Bloomfield playing slide guitar. What an amazing record. This one starts off with Born in Chicago, and it just blows everything away. Just amazing. I'm old enough and lucky enough that also in 1965, that summer, I went to the Newport Folk Festival, and that was my 16th birthday that weekend. And I got to see the Paul Butterfield Blues Band with Michael Bloomfield playing at the festival. He was also in the band with Dylan that went electric that summer. I didn't get to stay that night. We had to leave not midday, but at the end of the day, we had to leave, and I missed the night show where Dylan turned electric for the first time. But I got to see Bloomfield play with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, 1965 Newport Folk Festival. This was the album that really just blew everybody away at the time. Just amazing stuff. That same year, he played backup on this album by Bob Dylan, Highway 61 Revisited. Dylan always said that Michael Bloomfield was the best guitarist he ever heard. Story about this album, supposedly, Al Cooper, who plays the organ on this album, sort of talked his way into the recording session, and he was the guitar player at the time. He brought his guitar, and he was supposedly plugged in, was sort of warming up a little bit, and then Mike Bloomfield came in, plugged his guitar in, warmed up, did some licks, and Al Cooper just said, unplug this guitar. So it's obviously not going to happen. I'm not playing guitar on this album. And went into the studio, the recording booth, and ended up talking his way onto playing organ on the album. But yeah, Michael Bloomfield playing amazing guitar on Like a Rolling Stone, as well as the rest of the album. Yeah, Mike Bloomfield on that one. The next year, later in 66, 1966, I'm sorry. The next year, 1966, he was still with the Paul Butterfield Blues Band, and they put out the album East West, with the same band, but with Bill Davenport on drums. Fantastic album. more blues psych than straight blues, but just a great, great album. Walking Blues, Get Out of My Life, Work Song, Mary Mary by Mike Naismith, and East West, 13-minute raga psych album, song. Fantastic. Of course, the story was that they went to California and were playing there, and all the local musicians from the Byrds and the Grateful Dead, Jefferson Airplane, all these people heard him play guitar, and he taught them a lot. They were sort of futzing around with sort of folk guitar, and he just blew them all away. And they all like, how do you do that? How do you do that? And he was a mentor to a lot of those guys playing guitar. But fantastic guitar player. And this is the album East West, where he was on. In 1967, the next year, he produced and played on this album with James Cotton, and it's called just James Cotton. This is a European pressing from the Netherlands, recorded 67 and 68 with James Cotton and Sam Lay back from on drums, a bunch of other people. He's not credited as playing guitar on this, but I've read that he definitely played a lot of guitar on this album. But he did produce it, produced by Michael Bloomfield in 1968. So he's all over this album by James Cotton. There you go. Also, in 1968, he left Paul Butterfield and decided to form his own band with Nick Gravenitis maybe. And the band they formed was the Electric Flag. Short-lived band. I think by the time the album was released, the band had already broken up because of infighting and drugs, etc., etc. And this album, it's good. It's inconsistent, shall we say. But there's some great bits on here. He plays guitar along with Harvey Brooks. Barry Goldberg is on keyboards. Buddy Miles is on drums. Yeah, it's has some great stuff on it. Definitely, even Richie Havens is on here a little bit. But definitely worth having. Inconsistent, but some great stuff on there. So really, by the time this album was actually released, the band had already broken up. That same year, Al Kooper, who he had known from the Highway 61 Revisited album, contacted Michael and said, hey, we should put together an album of more jam album. Songs, obviously, but more jammy, more just hanging out and playing. So they got together and they put out Super Sessions, one of the great albums of the time. Originally, it was Al Kooper and Mike Bloomfield with Harvey Brooks on bass, Barry Goldberg on electric piano, and he played one day, and they recorded side one, and he never showed up for the second day. They say insomnia. I think it's a nice way of saying he had a drug problem. And Al Kooper called up his friend Stephen Stills and said, can you come on over and play? So Stills came over and they played, and they had the second side of the album. So the first side is Albert's Shuffle, Stop, Man's Temptation, His Holy Modal Majesty, and Really, all with Al Kooper and Mike Bloomfield. And side two is with Stephen Stills. It Takes a Lot to Laugh, Takes a Train to Cry, Season of the Witch, You Don't Love Me, and Harvey's Tune. Just great, great stuff. Really hard to find a clean copy of this album. It took me years to find a clean copy, so I'm glad I finally got one. But a great, great album. After this album came out, Al Kooper decided to put together a show at the Fillmore East, and the Fillmore in San Francisco in September of 1968, and came up with this album, The Live Adventures of Mike Bloomfield and Al Kooper, recorded at Bill Graham's Fillmore Auditorium, San Francisco, September 26th, 27th, 28th, 1968, also featuring Elvin Bishop and Carlos Santana. This is a killer record. They do everything from 59th Street Bridge Song, Simon and Garfunkel song, to The Wait, to That's All Right, Green Onions, Dear Mr. Fantasy. Just great, great album. Cover by Norman Rockwell, the artist. There's the back. 2-record set. But just a wonderful, wonderful record by Mike Bloomfield with Al Kooper. That was 1968. 1969, he played on this album, which I had an original when it first came out and lost it along the way. I found this copy. This is Father and Sons. This is a French pressing, which I found at a garage sale a number of years ago. This is a 2-record set with Muddy Waters, Otis Spann, Michael Bloomfield, Paul Butterfield, Donald Duck Dunn, Sam Lay, and Buddy Miles. What a crew that was. So, side 1 of the first album is recorded in the studio, and side 2 was recorded live at the Super Cosmic Joy Scout Jamboree in Chicago in April 1969. So, personnel, like I said, is Muddy Waters, Otis Spann, Bloomfield, Butterfield, Duck Dunn, Sam Lay, Buddy Miles, etc. If you don't know this record, you're missing out. This is a must. Fantastic album. They do everything from All Aboard, Can't Lose What You Never Had, I'm Ready, 40 Days and 40 Nights, Long Distance Call, Got My Mojo Working, of course. Muddy Waters sings almost all the songs. Great, great album, Fathers and Sons. Absolutely love that cover, always have. That was 1969. 1969, he started putting out solo albums after that. One of the first ones I have, I have some of his stuff. First one I have of his is called It's Not Killing Me. Again, inconsistent, but some great licks in here by Mike Bloomfield. It's a big band with everything from organs, saxophones, trumpets, accordions. It's basically Michael Bloomfield with Mark Knopfler and Nick Gravenitis singing. A lot of other people I don't really recognize the names. It's a good album. I mean, I have it because I'm a big fan of Mike Bloomfield. Whenever I see anything by him, I grab it. It's a good one, but again, a little inconsistent. That's 1969. Then we jump ahead to 1976, where I got this record called If You Love Those Blues, Play 'Em As You Please. This is a great album. This was put out in conjunction with Guitar Player magazine. And basically, he runs through different styles of blues. He talks about them and then plays all different styles. So he has everything from, country blues, Chicago blues, Texas blues, etc. And he talks about them and demonstrates how to play them. In other words, the first one is, if you love these blues, and his comment is, this is a gospel style of blues in E flat, done in the style of B.B. King in the mid-60s. It's also based on many Ray Charles songs. The next one, Hey Foreman. These are white rural blues in the style of Carter Family or Jimmy Rogers. This fusion of country western music and the blues is part of the history of rural music in America, etc. So he goes on. It is a fantastic album. Put out by Guitar Player Records, Guitar Player magazine. Fantastic, really well worth looking into and trying to find. Now we go 1977 with his album, Mike Bloomfield, called Aniline. This one's a little bit better. I like this a little more. It's a little more stripped down. Not that big band, no horns or anything. It's a Mike Bloomfield on guitar. Basically he does everything. I'm sorry, yeah. It's all he plays guitar. And some of the songs have Mark Knopfler again, etc. So really good album. What else can I say about it? Haven't listened to it for a while. Tacoma Records, 1977. Love that picture. So yeah, Aniline, Michael Bloomfield from 1977. 1980, one of his better ones, Living in the Fast Lane from 1980 on Waterhouse Records. He changed the labels as often as I change underwear. Maudie, Shine on Love, Roots, Watkins Rag, Andy's Bad, Big Sea Blues. Just great stuff. Guitar playing never, even in the depths of his heroin addiction, his guitar playing never seemed to suffer. Just great. He died, one of his last shows was with Dylan in 1981 in California. Bob asked him to come and play at his show. Supposedly he showed up in a bathrobe and slippers, shuffled out on stage, played the hell out of it, and 3 days later was found in his car. Died of an overdose of amphetamines and some other drugs, but sad. After he died, literally the week he passed away, this album was released, and this is called Cruising for a Bruising, and this one's pretty good also. There he is, Mike Bloomfield. Got this in the shrink with the original price tag. Most of these records from Mike Bloomfield you can pick up for $10 and under, certainly $15 and under. So I definitely urge you to dig into his discography, and when you see something by Mike Bloomfield, you know there's going to be something interesting on there anyway. And the last record I had by him is a compilation, which came out in 1983, 2 years after he passed away, called Bloomfield, a Retrospective, including unreleased material. So this is very cool. There it is. So this has, I Got My Mojo Working, from Newport Folk Festival, introduction by Peter Yarrow, Born in Chicago, then the Electric Flag, a couple of cuts from the Electric Flag, then some solo work, more stuff from Super Sessions with Nick Ravenitis, John Hammond and Dr. John. He put out an album, Triumvirate, with Dr. John and John Hammond and himself. I've always wanted to like that more than I actually did like it. I still would like to find a copy and get that into my collection. He did musical scores. He did all sorts of things. But this is a great double album. Definitely urge you, if you see this, to grab it and pick it up. And there they are at the Newport Folk Festival. So that's a little tribute to the great guitar player, Michael Bloomfield. Gone way too soon, died 37 years old in 1981. Today would have been his 80th birthday, 2 days after Mick Jagger's birthday, and mine. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed what you saw. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. I appreciate that. And until next time, peace.